step back in time with me to the early 1900s, a world where horse-drawn carriages still shared the roads with early automobiles, where electricity was still new, and where life looked simple, at least from the outside. But look closer, and you'll see that the early 20th century was filled with bizarre, creepy, and downright horrifying practices. Things that were completely normal back then, but feel like nightmare fuel today. Let's explore the darkest, normal facts from the 1900s. Let's start with something that sounds straight out of a horror movie. Heroin cough syrup for children. Yes, you heard that right. In the early 1900s, if your little one had a bad cough, doctors didn't recommend honey, tea, or rest. They handed you a bottle of heroin syrup. And this wasn't some shady back-alley product. It was proudly advertised by big pharmaceutical companies. The labels promised it would soothe coughs, cure colds, and calm restless children. Which, let's be honest, yeah, heroin will definitely calm a restless child, probably a little too well. Imagine being a parent back then. Oh, little Timmy won't stop crying. No problem, just give him a spoonful of heroin. He'll either be asleep in 5 minutes or won't care that he's awake. It's disturbing, but that's how normalized it was. Pharmacies stocked it, parents trusted it, and doctors prescribed it like candy. In fact, Bayer, the same company that makes aspirin, was one of the leading sellers. To them, heroin wasn't a dangerous street drug. It was a miracle medicine. Of course, the problem was that kids and adults quickly became addicted. Withdrawals were brutal, overdoses were common, and families had no idea why their medicine was destroying lives. It wasn't until years later that regulations finally shut this down. So next time you complain about cherry-flavored cough syrup tasting bad, just be glad it doesn't come with a side of addiction and a trip to rehab. Now let's talk about photography, but not the kind you're used to. In the early 1900s, death was everywhere. Medicine was primitive, life expectancy was short, and childhood illnesses were often fatal. So when a family member died, people wanted one last keepsake. Enter post-mortem photography. Families would pose their deceased loved ones for portraits, sometimes dressed in their best clothes, other times propped up to look alive. Some even had their eyes painted open on the photographs. Imagine flipping through a family album and realizing, oh wait, Uncle Henry's smile is permanent because he's been dead for 3 days. And here's the really chilling part. These weren't hidden away like some shameful secret. They were proudly displayed in living rooms. Guests might stop by, admire the photo and say, wow, they look so peaceful. Yeah, because they literally can't move. It's creepy to us, but for families then, it was normal. They didn't have iPhones with thousands of selfies. If you wanted to remember someone, sometimes that one haunting photo was all you got. Today, we fear radiation. Back then, they sold it as a lifestyle. In the early 1900s, radium was the wonder element. It glowed in the dark, it was new, and people thought it had healing powers. So what did companies do? They put it in everything. Clocks, watches, toothpaste, cosmetics, even drinking water. Yes, people actually sipped on radium-infused beverages like it was a magical energy drink. There was even a famous product called Radithor that promised to boost your health and vitality. Spoiler alert, it didn't. And women who painted glow-in-the-dark watch dials, the famous radium girls, were told to lick their paintbrushes to make the tips fine. Their jaws literally rotted away from radiation poisoning. But hey, at least their teeth glowed in the dark, right? It's shocking to think about, but back then, glowing skin wasn't a TikTok beauty filter, it was a death sentence. If you think reality TV is exploitative, wait until you hear this. In the early 1900s, freak shows were mainstream entertainment. People with physical deformities, rare conditions, or unique appearances were put on display like circus animals. Families would take their kids to the carnival, grab some popcorn, and pay to gawk at people with conditions like dwarfism, gigantism, or conjoined twins. It was the Netflix of the early 20th century, except the stars weren't actors, they were human beings being exploited, and the advertising made it worse. Posters would call them monstrosities of nature or freaks of creation. Imagine your job title being, "Come see the guy with two heads." It's disturbing, but here's the creepiest part. For some performers, this was their only way to make a living. Society shut them out, so the freak show became their only form of survival. Entertainment for the masses, misery for the performers. Today, we know cigarettes cause cancer. In the early 1900s, cigarettes were marketed as healthy. Ads featured smiling doctors saying, "This brand soothes sore throats." Some even claimed smoking helped digestion or reduced stress during pregnancy. Yes, you heard that right. Pregnant women were told to smoke. Kids weren't left out either. Companies put children in cigarette ads, normalizing the idea that smoking was just part of growing up. And the public bought into it. Literally. Lighting up wasn't a vice, it was a lifestyle. You weren't cool unless you had a cigarette dangling from your lips. It's creepy to think how deeply people trusted these ads. Then again, a century from now, people might look back at our energy drinks and say the same thing. Now let's step inside the asylums. If you suffered from anxiety, depression, or even something mild like insomnia in the early 1900s, you risked being institutionalized. And the treatments? They were pure nightmares. Electroshock therapy, ice baths, and lobotomies were common. Doctors would literally jam metal instruments into a patient's brain, scramble it around, and call it a cure. Side effects included permanent brain damage, personality changes, or, death. And here's the creepy irony. Many families thought they were helping. They believed sending a loved one to an asylum meant better care. In reality, many patients were tortured, neglected, or forgotten altogether. So the next time you're stressed and someone tells you to just relax, remember, it could be worse. 100 years ago, they might have prescribed you a lobotomy. Finally, let's talk about child labor. Today, childhood is about school, play, and TikTok dances. In the early 1900s, it was about long hours in factories, farms, and coal mines. Kids as young as 5 worked 10 to 12-hour shifts, covered in soot, handling dangerous machinery. Photographs from the time show tiny kids with hollow eyes, standing beside men twice their size, doing the exact same work. And they weren't being paid in iPads or Fortnite skins. They were earning pennies. Parents didn't see this as cruelty. They saw it as survival. If every family member didn't work, they couldn't eat. It was normalized, even celebrated, but it came with tragedy. Thousands of children were maimed or killed in accidents that would horrify us today. So the next time you hear a kid complain about doing chores, just remember, at least they're not working the night shift in a coal mine. The early 1900s might look romantic in black and white photos, but peel back the curtain and it's filled with practices that are downright terrifying. From heroin cough syrup to radioactive makeup, it's a reminder that what's normal today might be viewed as creepy tomorrow. So here's the real question. 100 years from now, what will people say about us? If you enjoyed these dark truths about history, make sure to subscribe because we're just scratching the surface.